My name is Elizabeth. 3 months ago, I woke up in a Denver hospital bruised, stitched, and barely breathing, only to find out my family had left my daughters alone while they flew to Cancun. That was the day I realized the people I trusted most would rather sip cocktails than save my children, and it's also the day I began planning my escape from their grip. Before I get into the full story, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city or country in the comments below. The antiseptic sting of St. Luke's Hospital in Denver still lives in my memory. Bleach-scrubbed walls, overhead lights too bright to cry under, and the constant beep of a monitor reminding me that yes, I was still alive. Barely. I couldn't move my left arm. My lip was split. There was dried blood in my hair. The nurse said I'd been unconscious for 2 hours. They stitched me up after the car accident, but no one could stitch up the panic unraveling inside me. I had just enough strength to fumble for my phone. My hands shook so violently I almost dropped it. I dialed my sister. She picked up after the 3rd ring. "Mia, I need you to take the girls, please. They're home alone." I was on my way back when my voice cracked mid-sentence. Mia's response was ice cold. "I'm not a babysitter, Liz." "What?" "I just got my nails done. I'm not driving across the city for your drama." I could barely process her words. "Drama? Mia, I wrecked the car. I was hit." My head, my arm, please. Please go get them. I just need a few hours until I... "No," she snapped. "Figure it out. I'm not your built-in nanny. I told you not to have kids if you couldn't handle life." And just like that, the line was no longer a lifeline. It was a blade. "I'm begging you," I whispered. But she'd already hung up. I sat there in the bed, staring at the wall phone in disbelief. My thumb hovered over her contact, but I didn't press it again. I could hear the nurse outside asking someone to lower their voice. Another patient sobbing down the hallway. Everything in that hospital sounded too loud, except the silence from the one person I thought I could rely on. The tears came hard and fast, the kind that turn your whole body into a shiver. Not because of the crash, but because of the crash that came after. The one where your illusion of family smashes into the reality of who they really are. I kept picturing my girls. 9-year-old Rosie, who still sleeps with a night light and asks me to check her closet for monsters. And little Hannah, 5 years old, all curls and chaos and glitter-stained cheeks. Alone. At home. I'd been driving back from my second shift when it happened. The pickup ran a red light, slammed into my passenger side. I remember the glass shattering, my body jerking sideways, the airbag punching me in the chest. And now I was stuck in this sterile room, tethered to machines, with no way to reach my daughters. No family, no help, just me, and a growing pit of dread that felt like it would swallow me whole. I tried calling Mir again, straight to voicemail. I left a message. "Please, I need help. I need someone to bring the girls here just until I'm released, please." I don't know why I expected her to call back. Minutes passed, then 30, then 60, still nothing. Eventually, I pressed the red call button beside my bed. A nurse came in, her eyes kind but already tired. "Is there someone we can contact for you?" she asked. I tried to answer, but my throat tightened. I nodded. "My parents," I whispered. "They're the only ones left." The call to my parents wasn't my proudest moment. I was still in that hospital bed, head pounding, gauze wrapped around my shoulder, trying to keep it together for the sake of my girls. But inside, I was unraveling. The nurse helped prop me up, her tone gentle. "Just dial out and press the green button. I'll give you some privacy, okay?" I nodded. My hand trembled as I typed in the number I'd known by heart since I was 13. My mom picked up almost immediately. Cheerful, breezy. "Hi, sweetheart, you're calling late. Everything okay?" Just hearing her voice made my throat close up. "Mom," I croaked. "I'm at St. Luke's. There was a car accident. My arm's in a sling and I can't walk. The girls are home alone. I need help, please." There was a long pause, then she giggled. "Oh, honey," she said, like I'd just told her I locked my keys in the car. "That's awful, but you always get so dramatic when you're tired." I blinked at the ceiling. "I'm not being dramatic. I'm in a hospital gown. The nurse had to cut my clothes off." "Well, we're already en route to Cancun," she chirped. "Your father finally agreed to that spa package, can you believe it? And we brought Mia along, you know how she needs a break." The words didn't make sense at first. Cancun, with Mia. "You're on vacation." I whispered. "Sweetheart," she said, her tone shifting to something patronizing. You should really consider relaxing yourself sometime. All this stress, it's aging you. Mom, what about the girls? My voice was rising now. I need someone to pick them up. Rosie's probably terrified. Well, we're mid-flight check-in and your father already upgraded us to first class. But oh, by the way, could you top up the shared account? The hotel froze our card. Said something about suspicious activity. I sat frozen. My ears rang louder than the heart monitor. You want me to send you money? Just a few hundred. It's not like you're working tonight. Because I'm in a hospital bed. Oh, Elizabeth, she sighed. You've always made such a fuss about every little thing. Why don't you call someone else? Who, Mom? My voice cracked. I don't have anyone else. She didn't respond, just a breathy silence. Then came the worst part, a soft beep. She hung up, she hung up. The hospital suddenly felt like it had grown colder by 10 degrees. I stared at the phone for a full minute before pressing it against my chest, the only thing anchoring me from completely falling apart. They were all gone. Mia, my mother, my father, and I was alone. Completely, achingly alone. The lights above me flickered faintly, maybe a power dip, maybe just my own vision blurring. But in that moment, the world felt unbearable. What did I do to deserve this? Why was I always the one clawing through the dirt to stay upright while they flew off, carefree and weightless? The tears came again, hot and silent this time, leaking from the corners of my eyes and soaking the edge of the hospital pillow. I kept hearing my mother's voice in my head like a bad echo. You always make such a fuss. No, I thought, not anymore. That's when something inside me shifted quietly but decisively. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as function, a tool, a thing to be used to pay, to sacrifice, until I broke. And now that I was broken, they didn't even pretend to care. So maybe, just maybe, it was time I stopped caring, too. Not about my girls, never about them. But about them, the ones who left. Because if no one was coming to save me, I would have to save myself. It was almost 9 p.m. when the hospital room door creaked open again. By then, I'd stopped crying. Mostly. I'd wiped my face with a scratchy tissue until the skin under my eyes burned. The IV beeped softly beside me. The curtain was half drawn and the TV played some old sitcom on mute. The kind of background noise you use to pretend your world isn't falling apart. I turned my head slowly, expecting maybe a nurse with paperwork or another round of meds. But it wasn't a nurse. It was Jackson. Jackson Cole. My boss. Sharp suit, navy blue, top button undone. Hair slightly windblown like he'd rushed over without thinking twice. In his hand, of all things, a small basket wrapped in cellophane. Fruit, crackers, and a bottle of coconut water tucked awkwardly into the corner. Hey, he said, standing just inside the door, clearly unsure if he was intruding. You missed your shift. I got worried. I blinked, caught so off guard I forgot to speak. Of all the people I thought might show up, he wasn't on the list. Jackson, I finally managed. My voice was thin and raspy. What are you doing here? He stepped forward slowly. You always text when you're running late. Tonight nothing, not even a call, so I pulled your emergency contact from HR. It just said Mia, and when I called her. He didn't finish the sentence. His expression darkened. She told you not to bother, I guessed bitterly. He nodded. Said you overreact to things and hung up on me. I looked away, embarrassment blooming hot across my chest. I hated that he knew now. That someone from work had seen behind the curtain. I shouldn't have come uninvited, he said gently. But when I found out you were at St. Luke's, I figured screw protocol. I swallowed hard, then whispered, they're home alone. He furrowed his brow. Your girls, I nodded, biting my lip. My sister refused to go, my parents. I let out a breath that was closer to a laugh. They're in Cancun. They wanted me to top up the vacation fund, said they were already boarding. Jackson said nothing at first, just looked at me, not the way people usually do when you cry in front of them, not with pity or discomfort. He looked at me like he was connecting dots in his mind and didn't like the picture it was forming. Where do you live? He asked after a moment. Baker Street, just off Federal. He nodded once, then said, I'm going to go get them. I blinked. What? Your girls, he said, calm as can be. You're here, they're alone, it's not even a question. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. I wasn't used to people just offering help, not without a catch, not without a sigh or a guilt trip or a list of reasons why it wasn't convenient. You don't have to, I finally said. I know. He set the basket down on the windowsill and walked closer, pulling a small notepad and pen from his coat pocket. I need their names, ages, and how to get inside if the door's locked. Anything I should know, neighbors, pets, what they sleep with. Whatever matters. Tell me everything. The tears came again, but different this time. Softer, laced with disbelief. I told him everything. Their names, Rosie and Hannah, ages 9 and 5. That Rosie would pretend she wasn't scared but would be clutching her stuffed owl like a life raft. That Hannah sometimes sleepwalked and always needed her nightlight on. That the key was under the flower pot and the alarm code was the same 4 digits I used for everything. He took it all in without flinching, without judgment. When I paused, he just nodded once and said, "I'll be back in an hour." And then, just like that, he left. No fanfare, no empty promises, just quiet, decisive action. I lay back in the hospital bed, stunned. Who does that? Who sees someone at rock bottom and doesn't look away? I stared at the ceiling and realized something that hit harder than I expected. Jackson was the only person who had seen me that day, not as a burden, not as a bother, but as someone worth helping. He didn't ask what I'd done to deserve being abandoned. He didn't imply that I should have figured it out myself. He just listened and acted, and that somehow meant more than I could ever explain. Time moved strangely after Jackson left. I stared at the wall clock across from my bed, its second hand ticking with cruel steadiness. My body ached, but I barely felt it. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios. What if he couldn't find the key? What if the girls were too scared to go with him? What if they screamed and cried because he was a stranger? But then I remembered the way he listened. The way he'd looked me in the eye and said, "I'll be back." So I waited and hoped and tried not to fall apart all over again. 47 minutes later, the door creaked open, and there they were. Rosie walked in first, holding her little sister's hand. Her hair was in messy braids, and she was still in her pajamas, pink with unicorns that glowed faintly in the dark. Her face was blotchy, like she'd been crying. Hannah followed close behind, clutching her stuffed elephant so tight its trunk bent sideways. She looked tired, confused, and too small for all this. And behind them, Jackson, still in his suit but with one cartoon-themed backpack slung over his shoulder and a juice box tucked under his arm like it belonged there. I didn't realize I was crying until Rosie gasped, "Mommy!" They ran to the bed. I tried to sit up but winced, my stitches pulling. Rosie reached me first, wrapping her arms around my middle and pressing her face into my hospital gown. "I thought you weren't coming back," she whispered. "I'm here, baby," I choked out. "I'm right here." Hannah climbed into the bed without asking, nestling under my good arm like it was her rightful place. Her elephant flopped beside us, staring blankly at the wall. For a while, none of us spoke. There were just quiet sobs and soft hiccups, the sound of reunion. Jackson stood off to the side, watching with a kind of stillness I hadn't seen before. Not the commanding energy of a boss running a morning meeting, but the quiet patience of someone who knew what it meant to hold space for grief. When Rosie finally looked up, she whispered, "Is that your friend?" I glanced at Jackson. "That's Mr. Jackson," I said softly. "He made sure you weren't alone tonight." She looked at him the way little girls do when they meet someone kind but unfamiliar, cautious, curious but not afraid. "Thank you," she said, her voice tiny but clear. Jackson smiled. "You're very welcome, Rosie, and you too, Hannah. You're both really brave." Hannah blinked at him, then nodded like she'd just given him a secret badge of approval. After a few more minutes, Jackson quietly moved a chair beside my bed and sat down. Not like a guest, more like someone who intended to stay for a while. I couldn't stop watching him. Most people, if they had come at all, would have dropped the girls off, said some vague words of comfort, and left. But he didn't. He stayed. Rosie eventually curled up at the foot of the bed, and Hannah fell asleep under my arm, snoring softly into my side. "You didn't have to do any of this," I whispered, brushing Hannah's curls from her eyes. Jackson looked down at his hands. "You said they were alone," he said simply. That was enough. Something about the way he said it made me feel like he wasn't just talking about tonight. There was a long pause, then I asked, "How did they react when you got there?" He let out a breath. Rosie tried to act like everything was fine, but her hands were shaking when she packed their things. "And Hannah," he paused. "She asked if you were going to heaven." My heart cracked. She thought the crash, I couldn't even finish the sentence. I told her you were hurt but strong, that she'd see you soon. I looked at him, blinking back fresh tears. That was the right answer. He gave a small nod. They're your heart, he said, almost to himself. Of course I'd bring them. That one sentence undid me. There were no grand declarations, no sweeping promises, just quiet presence, steady kindness, and the kind of loyalty that feels even stronger when it's not owed. Thank you, Jackson, I whispered. I don't know how to say it any other way. He met my eyes, and in that moment I saw it. He wasn't here because he felt obligated. He was here because he chose to be. And somehow that made all the difference. The next morning I woke to soft humming. For a moment I thought I was dreaming. The antiseptic sting of the ER was gone. The harsh lights above me replaced with the glow of a window cracked open to let in October air. I wasn't in the same crowded, curtained-off space from yesterday. This was a new room. Private. The girls were still asleep, one on a padded cot, the other curled beside me like she always did on stormy nights. Someone had tucked them in with fleece blankets covered in dancing butterflies. And I had sheets. Fresh ones. Soft. Not the thin, scratchy kind from last night. A real pillow under my head. A tray table pushed gently to the side with oatmeal, bananas, and 2 boxes of apple juice waiting patiently for tiny hands to grab them. I blinked hard, adjusting to the light, to the peace. Then a warm voice said, "You're awake." She stood at the foot of the bed, dressed in lavender scrubs, dark curls piled on her head, smile wide enough to catch the sun. "I'm Lourdes," she said. "I'm here to help with the girls while you rest. Jackson said you might be too polite to ask for a nanny, so he went ahead and found one anyway." I blinked again. "A nanny," she laughed softly. "Just temporary. I'm on call for situations like this, emergency care. He said he didn't want your girls missing you in cartoons, so I brought both." She gestured to a little rolling cart near the wall, stacked with coloring books, markers, puzzles, even a tiny pink tea set. My eyes welled up instantly, not from stress, but because, for the first time in what felt like years, someone had thought ahead for me, covered a gap before I had to fall through it. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't need to say anything," Lourdes replied gently. "Just heal." Rosie stirred, sat up, and spotted the cartoon-themed oatmeal bowl waiting for her. "Are we still in the hospital?" she asked, yawning. "Yes, baby," I said, brushing her hair back. "But we're safe, and we're together." A short time later, the door opened quietly again, Jackson. This time dressed down, no blazer, just a button-up shirt and dark jeans. In his hands, 3 cups of coffee and a small paper bag that smelled like cinnamon and heaven. "I figured the food here might be efficient but not inspiring," he said with a soft smile. He handed Lourdes her coffee, set one on my tray, and passed the bag to Rosie, who peeked inside with a delighted gasp. "Sticky buns," she breathed. "Only the finest from Gracie's Cafe," Jackson said. "Tell them Jackson sent you and they charge you extra." I couldn't help but laugh. It felt strange, like my body had forgotten how, but there it was, real, bubbly, alive. We shared breakfast quietly, the kind of breakfast where no one checks their phone and no one rushes. The girls sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring side by side, their little heads bent in concentration. Jackson stood by the window, sipping his coffee, eyes scanning the trees outside like he wasn't quite sure what to do with stillness. I watched him for a moment, then said, "Why are you doing all this?" He turned, leaned one shoulder against the window frame. "I've seen a lot of people spiral," he said quietly. "When the ground falls out from under them, they usually fall alone." I nodded slowly. "But you didn't fall," he added. "You're still standing. I just wanted to be the ground under your feet, even if just for a little while." I stared at him. That wasn't pity in his voice. It was respect. "You barely know me," I whispered. He smiled, eyes soft. "I know what kind of mother you are. I see it every time you talk about them." That's all I needed to know. I swallowed hard. Something deep inside me shifting, uncoiling maybe. The part of me that always braced for abandonment wasn't sure how to receive kindness without flinching. So I just said, "Thank you," and hoped he knew I meant every word. It was late afternoon when we slipped out onto the hospital's rooftop garden. The nurse had offered to keep an eye on the girls for an hour while Lourdes took them to the playroom. I hadn't been outside in days, not really. But the fall air felt good against my skin. Crisp, clean, real. We found a bench tucked beneath a skinny tree still holding onto its orange leaves. Jackson brushed it off with his hand before letting me sit first. It was a small gesture, but I noticed it. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun drop lower over Denver's skyline. Then, without planning to, I said, "They always acted like I was the burden." Jackson turned his head slightly, just enough to show he was listening. "My parents," I continued, "they never said it outright, but it was always in the tone. In the way they talked about Mia, my sister, as if she were the prize and I was the receipt." He said nothing, which made it easier to keep going. "They said I ruined their 20s, that they only got married because of me. I used to think they were joking. But then they'd leave me behind on vacations or forget my school plays. Once when I got straight A's, my mom said, 'Well, that's the least you can do after the trouble you've caused.'" Jackson's jaw tightened. He didn't interrupt. "I got pregnant with Rosie when I was 22. Not planned, obviously. Her dad left before I even hit my second trimester. I called my parents crying, terrified, and my mom said, 'Well, you chose this. Don't expect us to rearrange our lives.'" He looked at me then. Not shocked, just quietly furious. I worked 3 jobs while pregnant. I went into labor during a lunch shift and still had to beg my manager to let me leave early. That's who I was back then. Someone who thought if I worked hard enough, maybe, just maybe, they'd stop seeing me as the disappointment. I laughed bitterly, wiped my eyes with my sleeve. But they didn't, not even when Hannah came along. If anything, that made it worse. 2 daughters, no husband, barely scraping by. I became the family cautionary tale. Jackson's hands were clenched on his lap now, knuckles white. They never called to check on the girls. Never offered help with school supplies or daycare or even birthday cakes. But they loved posting photos when they did visit, loved pretending to be the perfect grandparents online. I stared straight ahead, eyes burning. My mom once told me that Rosie was too intense and would end up just like me if I wasn't careful. Like being like me was a curse. Jackson's voice was quiet but steady when he finally spoke. "She said that to you," I nodded. "At Thanksgiving, right after asking if I could bring the mashed potatoes next year." He looked down at his hands, then out toward the skyline again. "You don't deserve this," he said simply. Not like a compliment, like a truth carved into stone. I felt the tears well up again, but this time I didn't try to blink them away. "It's always been like this," I whispered. "Even when I did everything right. Even when I stayed quiet, nothing was ever enough." He turned to me, eyes steady. "You've done more than enough." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I let it go. No one had ever said that to me before, not without strings, not with such certainty. We sat in silence again, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that made you feel safe. The kind that said, "You don't have to explain yourself anymore." That night, after the girls were tucked in and the hospital wing fell quiet, I did something I'd been avoiding all day. I opened Instagram. It was a mistake, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe I needed to see it. The top of my feed greeted me with a familiar face, Mia's, glowing in a golden hour selfie. She was in a beach cabana, holding a frozen drink with a neon straw and a tiny paper umbrella. Behind her, the ocean shimmered like a movie set. Her caption read, "Best family, vacay, ever." Tropical palm-blessed sunshine queen. I stared at it, blinking, as if maybe I'd read it wrong. Then came the carousel of photos. My mother in a wide-brimmed sun hat, smiling like someone who didn't have a daughter in a hospital bed. My father sprawled in a lounger, drink in hand. Mia again, this time mid-twirl in a turquoise bikini with another caption. "Nothing like escaping drama with the people who matter most." Face blowing a kiss. My heart didn't sink. It snapped. It didn't even feel like sadness anymore. It was something colder, cleaner, like the grief had burned off and all that was left was clarity. I wasn't part of that family. I'd been orbiting their lives like some unwanted moon, always pulled in by guilt, always used for my gravity and then ignored until they needed something. And right now, they needed money. That shared family account, the one my mother asked me to top up after she'd hung up on me. I opened the banking app. Sure enough, the hotel charge had gone through. $312.84 from a beachfront resort in Cancun. Another charge right behind it, $1.68 for something labeled spa menu, couple's room. I scrolled farther back. My father had withdrawn another $400 the week before for trip prep, most likely. I sat there, cross-legged in the hospital recliner, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, watching their carefree life flicker across my screen while I nursed stitches and bruises and tried to keep my daughters from feeling abandoned. And they had the nerve to say I was dramatic. Something inside me settled, sharp, still, and entirely resolved. Without hesitation, I clicked the icon in the app that read Account Controls. Then I hit Freeze Account. Confirm. Yes. The app made a little click sound like a safe being locked. I stared at the screen. Then I opened my messages and typed, "To Mia, Mom, Dad, good luck explaining to the hotel why the cards declined." Send. No emojis, no explanation, just the facts, just a line in the sand. I put my phone down on the tray table beside the hospital bed, suddenly aware of my heartbeat slowing. Not racing, not panicking, just calm. I wasn't sobbing. I wasn't shaking. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, I felt like I had weight again. Not as a burden, but as something solid, something rooted. They could call me selfish. They could gossip about me to their sunburned friends. They could spin it however they wanted. But I wasn't funding their version of family anymore. That night, I climbed into the narrow hospital bed beside Hannah and pulled her close. Her little hand found mine in her sleep, instinctively, like she'd been reaching for it all along. I stared out the window at the city lights and whispered, "We're going to be okay," because I wasn't waiting for rescue anymore, and I wasn't sending any more lifeboats to people who'd set me on fire. It had been 4 days since the hospital discharged me. I was home again, if you could call a 2-bedroom rental with creaky floors and thin walls a home. But it felt safer than it had in months. Jackson had stocked the fridge before we arrived. The girls' coloring books were stacked on the coffee table. Lourdes checked in daily even though she wasn't being paid anymore. I was sore, tired, and healing, but healing my way. The silence from my parents and Mia after the account freeze didn't surprise me. No frantic apologies, no voicemails, just silence. Until the doorbell rang. It was a Saturday morning. I was braiding Hannah's hair on the couch, her favorite purple ribbons in my lap. Rosie was at the dining table, elbow-deep in glitter glue. The bell rang twice. Then came the banging, insistent, angry. I stood slowly. My stomach knew before I opened the door, and there they were. My mother in a too-tight resort t-shirt, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. My father's face was red, not sunburned, but fuming. Mia trailed behind them, arms crossed, fake lashes blinking too fast. "You've got some nerve," my mom hissed, pushing her way inside before I could stop her. I stood frozen in the doorway. "Excuse me," I said, voice low. "The card declined while we were checking out, Elizabeth," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? They treated us like criminals." I closed the door behind them slowly, trying to steady my breath. "I told you I needed help," I said evenly. "And you told me to top up the card." My father slammed his hand on the wall. "You had no right to freeze that account." "It's in my name," I said. "I opened it to help you cover bills after Dad's surgery, remember? I made you co-signers. I thought we were family." "Don't you dare play the victim," Mia sneered, stepping forward. "You've always loved being the center of the drama." I stared at her. "You mean the drama where I was nearly killed in a car crash and left my daughters alone because my own sister couldn't be bothered to show up?" Rosie peeked around the hallway corner. "Mama," she whispered. My heart broke. I walked toward her quickly, crouched low, and smiled. "It's okay, baby," I said. "Why don't you take Hannah and go draw in the bedroom for a little while?" She nodded wide-eyed and took her sister's hand. Only once the door clicked closed behind them did I turn back to my family. "You can scream," I said. "You can curse, but you're not getting access to that account again." "You ungrateful little brat," my father growled. "After everything we've done for you," I laughed, one sharp, bitter note. "Everything you've done to me, you mean?" My mother stepped forward, venom in her eyes. "You'll regret this. Don't think we won't make sure of it." "You're unstable, Elizabeth. You've always been emotional, fragile." "Keep going," I said, voice calm now. "It only makes what you're about to do more predictable." "What's that supposed to mean?" Mia spat. "You're going to try to turn this around," I said. "You're going to call me dangerous, neglectful. You're going to say I'm unfit to be a mother." Silence, just for a beat. Then my father's face twisted into something smug. Maybe someone should take a closer look at those kids' living conditions. Maybe someone already is, my mother added sweetly. After all, anonymous reports are such a helpful tool. They thought they had me cornered, that the fear would swallow me whole. But I didn't flinch. I stepped closer. You don't scare me anymore, I said. And if you so much as send another word my way, I'll file a restraining order and send every text, voicemail, and bank record to my lawyer. You wouldn't dare, my mother gasped. Try me, I whispered. My father opened his mouth to speak, but Jackson's voice cut in from the hallway. She's not alone. They turned. Jackson stood there, grocery bags in his arms, calm and steady as ever. I suggest you leave, he said plainly. You're trespassing. My mother scoffed, but for once she had no words. They left without another sound. No apology, no remorse, just footsteps retreating down the hallway like a parade of spoiled children. I closed the door, locked it, then leaned against it for a long, long minute. My heart was racing, but I didn't crumble, not this time. Jackson set the groceries down and crossed the room slowly. You okay? He asked. No, I whispered. But I'm getting there. That night, after the girls fell asleep curled up on the couch beneath a blanket of gold sequins and cookie crumbs, Jackson and I sat in the kitchen with mugs of black coffee and something heavier between us. Not silence, not awkwardness, something more like anticipation. I watched the steam curl from my cup. I know it's not over, I said finally. They'll come for me again, I can feel it. Jackson didn't argue. He didn't hit me with platitudes about peace or fresh starts. He didn't tell me to breathe or meditate or think positive. He just took a sip of coffee and said, then we'll be ready. That word stuck in my chest for a moment, warm and unfamiliar. I shouldn't involve you, I said, looking down. This is my mess, my family. You didn't sign up for this level of chaos. He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. Elizabeth, he said quietly, I don't show up where I'm not meant to be and I don't stay where I'm not needed. I looked up. His gaze was steady but not invasive. I didn't expect any of this, I admitted. I didn't even know how bad it was until I said it all out loud. It's like, once you hear yourself describe your own life, you realize just how much you've been swallowing. He nodded, slow and thoughtful. It's amazing how well we normalize pain when we think it's the price of being loved. I swallowed hard. Yes, that. I looked around my little kitchen. The chipped cabinets, the humming fridge, the half-finished drawing taped to the wall with a crooked rainbow and the words me and Mom scrawled in pink marker. I think I've always been waiting for them to change, I said softly. Waiting for my mom to call and say she was wrong. For Mia to say she didn't mean it. For my dad to show up and fix something. Jackson leaned back in his chair, arms crossed gently across his chest. But you stopped waiting, I nodded. And now I'm scared they'll punish me for it. He didn't blink. They already tried, he said. And you're still here, standing with your girls and with me. I looked at him then, really looked. Not just as the boss who brought coffee and sticky buns, not just as the man who saw me when I was broken, but as someone who stayed. The fridge buzzed. Somewhere down the hall, the faucet dripped. The kind of sounds that fill a house at night when everything else is finally still. Jackson reached into his pocket and pulled out something I hadn't seen before, a small folder. What's that? I asked. Photos, he said. From the past few days, hospital visits, coloring time, meals with the girls, nothing dramatic, just proof. He laid them on the table, one by one. Me holding Hannah in my hospital bed. Rosie feeding me a bite of her oatmeal. Lourdes helping the girls with a puzzle. Jackson pushing the stroller outside the pharmacy. You knew they'd try something, I whispered. He gave a soft shrug. Your father didn't exactly hide his intentions. I figured we'd get ahead of it. The photos weren't posed. They weren't curated for show. They were real. Messy, beautiful, ordinary moments that told a very different story than the one my parents would try to spin. I touched the edge of one, me asleep, head tilted against the window, Hannah curled on my chest like a baby cat. I look. Peaceful. You are peaceful, he said. Or at least you're getting there. The tears came then, not from sadness or pain, just from the quiet relief of being seen, heard, believed. I never had someone back me like this, I said. Jackson's voice was soft but certain. Now you do. It was a Thursday morning, the kind where everything feels too quiet. Rosie was at the kitchen table, humming while she traced letters in her workbook. Hannah was building a fortress of couch pillows, her giggles echoing through the living room. The coffee had just finished brewing. I was standing by the window, watching the leaves twist in the breeze. And then 3 knocks on the door, sharp, official. My heart stopped. I don't know how, but I knew. Not a neighbor, not a delivery, not even one of the girls' friends. I crossed the room slowly, pulse pounding in my ears. When I opened the door, the woman on the other side didn't smile. She wore a dark blazer, her hair pulled back tight, clipboard in hand, a plastic badge clipped to her lapel. "Elizabeth Marks," she asked. I nodded, voice caught somewhere in my throat. "I'm with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report concerning potential neglect. I'd like to come in and speak with you." My mouth went dry. My first thought wasn't about me, it was about the girls, Rosie's workbook, Hannah's squeals. The way their laughter made this place feel whole again. "Is everything okay, Mommy?" Rosie called from behind me. The agent's eyes flicked past my shoulder. I opened my mouth to speak, but Jackson's voice beat me to it. "She's not alone." He appeared beside me like clockwork, calm and composed in a soft gray sweater and jeans, holding 2 paper bags filled with groceries. "I'm Jackson Cole," he said, offering a steady hand. "Elizabeth's partner." Partner. The word floated there, unchallenged. "We live here together," he added smoothly. "And I'm happy to walk you through the last few weeks, doctor's visits, school prep, all of it. We've kept detailed records." He nodded toward the SUV parked just down the street, visible through the open door. "Car seats in the back, kids' snacks in the front. You're welcome to inspect it." The agent hesitated, caught off guard by the ease of it all. "I'd still like to speak to Elizabeth directly," she said, flipping her clipboard open. "Do you mind if I come in?" Jackson glanced at me, waiting. I nodded, stepping aside. My legs felt like water, but my spine stayed straight. She walked in and did a slow sweep of the apartment. Clean counters, child-safe locks, a calendar on the fridge with doctor appointments and school notes written in my handwriting. Jackson stayed quiet but close, his presence like a steady pulse beside me. The agent asked to speak to the girls. I agreed, heart thudding in my chest. But Rosie answered clearly. Hannah smiled wide and offered her a crayon. No fear, no confusion. Just a normal Thursday morning in our not-so-perfect, perfectly real home. The agent took a few more notes, asked a few routine questions. Then finally she looked up and said, "Everything seems in order here." Relief crashed through me so fast I nearly swayed. "Do you know who might have filed the report?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She hesitated. "It was anonymous. But this kind of report, vague concerns, poor timing, it's not uncommon when there's family tension." Jackson stepped forward. "We've documented everything," he said gently. "If anything else is submitted, we'll cooperate again. But I'd like it noted that we believe this was retaliatory." She gave a small nod, scribbled something, and said, "Understood." And then, just like that, she left. The door clicked shut behind her, and I exhaled so hard my knees buckled. Jackson caught me before I hit the floor. I pressed my face into his chest, trying to steady my breath. "They sent CPS," I whispered. "They tried to break you," he said, his voice low and fierce. "But they failed." The moment the door closed behind the CPS agent, I stood still. Not frozen, not stunned, just still. The kind of stillness that happens right after the storm passes, when the windows stop rattling but your ears still ring. "They sent CPS," I whispered again, more to myself than to Jackson. Saying it out loud didn't make it easier to believe. They really did it. He nodded slowly, still holding on to me, his arm firm across my back. "They played their last card," he said. "That was the move they thought would finish you." I stepped back, heart still pounding, but lighter now. It was like standing in the ashes of a fire you didn't light and realizing you were still breathing, still standing. The girls were back in the living room, coloring again like nothing happened. Rosie glanced up, her eyes searching mine. I forced a smile and she grinned back, like she knew I was safe again. Like she'd been watching me all along. "I knew they'd retaliate," I said quietly, turning back to Jackson. "But I thought it would be subtler, passive-aggressive texts, social media jabs, not this, not something that could destroy everything." Jackson shook his head. "They didn't want to wound you, Elizabeth. They wanted to erase you, undermine you, take away the one thing that gives you power, your role as their mother." I swallowed hard, because he was right. That's what had always made them squirm, not my anger, not my independence, but the way I loved my daughters, the way I kept showing up, the way I didn't disappear. They thought I'd fall apart, I said softly. But you didn't, he replied. You built something they can't touch, a real home, a life, a future, and the best part, I looked at him. They can't undo it. I sat down at the table, fingers shaking just slightly as I reached for my coffee from earlier. Cold now, but still grounding. I took a sip anyway. I thought the worst part was them abandoning me in that hospital bed, I said. But it wasn't. The worst part was realizing they were relieved I'd been hurt, that maybe, just maybe, they saw the accident as an opportunity to take control. Jackson sat across from me, quiet. And when I didn't crumble, I added, voice thin, they pushed harder. Because people like that, he said, they don't know how to handle women who rise. I laughed, short, surprised, but real. God, I said, pressing my palms to my eyes, when did I stop being afraid of them? Jackson didn't answer right away. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Maybe it wasn't one moment, he said. Maybe it was dozens of small ones, each time you chose your girls over their chaos, each time you made a decision that put peace before guilt. You didn't stop fearing them in one day, you just started loving yourself more. My throat tightened. Because that felt like the truth I hadn't dared to speak. I wasn't healed. I wasn't done grieving what I never had. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an apology for surviving. I looked over at Rosie, who had cut out a paper heart and was now taping it to the wall. Mama, she called out. Look, it says our home. I smiled. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was ours. And for the first time in a very long time, that was enough. 2 months later, the world looked different. Not dramatically. There were still overdue bills, still peanut butter in hair, still cereal crushed into the carpet, but different in the ways that mattered. The fear was gone, and in its place was a quiet rhythm I hadn't felt in years. The girls started school the first week of September. Hannah skipped all the way to the classroom door in mismatched socks, waving like she was boarding a cruise ship. Rosie clutched my hand until we reached her desk, then gave me a brave smile and said, I got it, Mom. I walked back to the car alone that morning, sat behind the wheel and let the silence settle in. It didn't scare me anymore. This wasn't loneliness, it was space. Space I could finally fill with my own voice. Jackson had offered to walk them with me that morning, but I said no. Not because I didn't want him there, but because I needed to do that part by myself. A small act of independence. A quiet victory. But when I got home, there he was leaning against the kitchen counter, holding 2 coffees and a brown paper bag. Your first kid-free morning in months, he said with a smile. Figured you might want to celebrate. Only if it's with something sticky and cinnamon-flavored, I teased. He handed me the bag. Gracie's finest. We ate at the table, just the 2 of us, sunlight streaming through the blinds, radio humming low in the background. This feels, I started, then trailed off. He looked at me. Like peace, I nodded. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a key. I figured you should have one, he said. To my place, no pressure, just if you ever need the space or a night off or backup. I took the key, turning it over in my hand. It wasn't a proposal, it wasn't a rescue, it was a gesture, one adult to another, one survivor to another, one heart quietly offering safety. I'm not ready for big changes, I said honestly. Not yet. He nodded. You don't need to be. I smiled. But I'm not scared of the idea anymore. That afternoon, I logged into the scheduling app for work. I had a message from the manager offering full-time hours again. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty typing back. Thank you, but I'll only be returning part-time. My daughters come first. I hit send and sat back, watching the cursor blink. I used to measure my worth in how much I could carry. Now I measured it in how gently I protected what mattered. The apartment didn't suddenly sparkle. The fridge still had expired yogurt I hadn't thrown out. But it was mine. Every picture on the wall, every sticky note on the fridge, every pair of shoes by the door, they were reminders that this life, flawed and unfinished, was something I built. Rosie came home that day with paint in her hair and a grin 3 miles wide. We're doing a talent show in a few months, she announced. Can I be in it? You can do anything you want, I said. And for once I meant it without fear, without flinching. 1 year later, I stood in the back of the school auditorium, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Not because I was nervous, well, maybe a little, but because my fingers wanted to hold something while my heart held everything else. The stage lights blinked. Parents settled into folding chairs. The scent of popcorn, construction paper, and kid-sized nerves filled the air. The school talent show was about to begin. Rosie was backstage, wrapped in a glittery cape, practicing her joke routine for the 100th time. Hannah had insisted on being her assistant, which mostly meant handing her a plastic wand and reminding her to smile. I was wearing a cardigan I hadn't worn since the hospital, the one that still smelled faintly of lavender detergent and second chances. Beside me, Jackson held 2 juice boxes and a bouquet of daisies. "They ready?" he whispered. I nodded. They were born ready. We found our seats in the second row, not the front. Rosie said the front was too intense, but close enough to see every grin, every sparkle, every moment. The stage curtains rustled, and then music, laughter, the squeak of a nervous kindergartner announcing his magic trick. The show had begun. While we waited for Rosie's turn, I scanned the crowd. It wasn't habit anymore, it was curiosity. And no, they weren't there. No sun hats, no smug glances, no curated appearances or forced smiles. My parents were back in Denver, working now. My mother had picked up a retail job she liked to complain about online. My father was repairing HVAC systems again. Mia was off the grid, last I heard, some new boyfriend in Arizona. I didn't follow them anymore. I didn't need to. They had lives now. Busy ones. Ones that, miraculously, left no room to interfere with mine. And me, I was finally out of their orbit. I breathed in deeply. The air smelled like freedom. On stage, Rosie stepped up to the microphone, her curls bouncing as she adjusted the stand. She cleared her throat dramatically. "What do you call a bear with no teeth?" she asked. The crowd leaned in. "A gummy bear," she announced, and a wave of laughter rolled across the room. I laughed too, loudly, proudly, fully. Hannah beamed beside her, holding up a giant foam board that read, "Thank you," in pink letters. And then, just for a moment, Rosie looked down into the crowd, scanning. Her eyes met mine. She smiled. The kind of smile that says, "I see you," and I smiled back, not just because she was brave or funny or my daughter, but because I was still here to witness it. Jackson leaned close, whispered, "You did it." "No," I whispered back. "We did." After the applause, the photos, the hugs sticky with juice and glitter, we walked home under a cotton candy sky. The girls skipped ahead, their capes fluttering like banners. Jackson carried the bouquet. I carried the memory. I used to think revenge looked like shouting, like lawsuits, like rage. But it doesn't. It looks like joy you don't have to explain. It looks like 2 girls laughing under streetlights, not looking back. It looks like being present at the very moment they said you'd never make it this far. If you've ever rebuilt your life after someone tried to tear it apart, if you've ever stood alone and chose to rise anyway, this story was for you. Drop a microphone in the comments if you've taken your power back quietly, without fireworks, just steady, radiant strength. And if this story meant something to you, really meant something, let me know. Like, comment, and share your voice. There's power in telling our stories. Until next time, be safe, be brave, and never forget they underestimated you. You survived anyway.